where today we are going to be doing our final division preview for this upcoming season with the NFC North. And as usual, before we get into it, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and check out the playlist to all the division previews that are in the description. And without further ado, let's get into this NFC North preview. First team that we have, or the team finishing last, is, for me, the Minnesota Vikings. I think many people will have this. I don't think they're ready yet, especially mainly at the quarterback position, and we'll get into that with the offensive depth chart here. That is obviously the biggest question with this team. It is the quarterback play. You have McCarthy, who you drafted, and you have Sam Darnold. It looks like Sam Darnold is going to start, and despite what I've said about their potential inconsistent quarterback play, which could lead to a last place finish in this division, I do think Sam Darnold could actually have a very good season, at least for Sam Darnold standards. Because when I look at how he played on the Panthers 2 years ago or whatever, when he actually had supporting cast, in like 7 games he had only three interceptions and I think it was 10 plus touchdowns. He played very good. And when you have Aaron Jones, who's a very good running back, Ty Chandler's a very good backup, you have obviously Justin Jefferson, one of the best receivers in football, arguably the best. You have Jordan Addison, who had a lot of production last year, especially with Jefferson's injury. And I mean, outside of that, it's all right. But you have Jefferson, you have Addison, you have Aaron Jones. You also have T.J. Hawkinson as well, one of the better tight ends. I could see, with a good O-line in Darrisaw, Reisner, Bradbury, Brian O'Neill, Ed Ingram, I could see Sam Darnold actually having a very productive season. Maybe 3,500. If he plays the full season, maybe 3,500 yards, 20 plus touchdowns, and less than 10 picks. I could see that for Sam Darnold, and I would not be surprised at all. And then they can move on to J.J. McCarthy the next season. But it's a very good O-line. You have your two guys at receiver, Jefferson, Addison. You have Jones. You have Hawkinson. I don't think Sam Darnold. I don't see a world where Sam Darnold can't be good in this offense. So it could be a pretty decent offense. It might not amount to a ton of wins, because their defense isn't, I don't think, the best, and we'll get into that now. Looking at these Viking, it's a bit of an older team or older group. You obviously have Jonathan Grenard, who you brought over from the Texans to replace Danielle Hunter. I do like Grenard. I think he's a very good young pass rusher, but he's not Danielle Hunter by any means. Linebacker wise, I don't think there's much outside of Grenard. Bullard, Phillips, and Tillery are decent players. You obviously bring in Ginkle. I don't mind that signing. You have Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman. And then secondary-wise, outside of Harrison Smith's old, obviously he can still produce, but he's on the older side. Cameron Bynum is decent. Byron Murphy has played well at times. You bring in Shaquille Griffin as well. It's not a bad defense by any means, but I don't think it's great. And although I do think Sam Darnold can have a good year, I don't think he'll have, obviously, an insane year. And I do think it'll be a bit of a rough year for Minnesota, and I do have them finishing with a 5-12 record. I also factored in their division as well. They do have a very tough division to play in with the Bears, Packers, and Lions. MVP, I don't think there's anyone else you could give it to outside of Jefferson. He could maybe get close to, especially if Sam Darnold can throw for 3,500 plus. Jefferson can easily get 1,700. So I gave him the MVP. He's clearly the best player on this team. Offensive player of the year, I also gave it to Justin Jefferson. And then defensive player of the year, I gave it to Jonathan Grenard, the edge rusher they took from the Texans. I mentioned he's not Danielle Hunter, but I still really like him as a player, and I think he can have a very good season. And then, speaking of edge rushers, I gave Rookie of the Year because I don't think McCarthy will play that much. I gave it to Dallas Turner, the edge they took out of Alabama, I believe. I thought he was going to go in the top 10, but the Vikings get him, I think, late in the first. And I think he'll have the best statistical season out of any Vikings rookie. But I do think it will be a bit of a rough season for Minnesota, but they can get a good pick next year. They can maybe They can play McCarthy, and if McCarthy plays well, it could be a very good team next year, and they can compete a little more with the rest of this division. And then moving on to the team that finishes third in this division, I do have that being the Chicago Bears. They obviously got the number 1 overall pick. They took Caleb Williams, and he's arguably in the best situation. I think McCarthy is in the second best situation of any quarterback, and I think Caleb Williams obviously is in the best situation, especially when you look at this offense. For the outside of Caleb Williams, you have DeAndre Swift, who I do have my questions about. I feel like he could turn out to be like Miles Sanders, where he's behind the Eagles O-line in the Eagles system, produces, and then gets paid by a team that isn't the Eagles, and he kind of declines. But outside of him, you still have Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and their O-line isn't bad by any means, but it's obviously not the Eagles. But that's not where this team stands out. They obviously stand out at the receivers, not just wide receivers. You obviously have DJ Moore, arguable top 10 receiver in football. You have Keenan Allen, who despite his old age, he's arguably a top 10 receiver in football. They 100% have 2 top 15 receivers. That's not debatable at all, in my opinion. It's whether you want to put him in the top 10 or not. They draft Rome Odunze, I think 9th overall out of Washington. He's very good, and the fact that he's the 3rd best receiver on this team could be pretty good for him. And then you also have guys like Tyler Scott and Velus Jones Jr., who aren't even that bad either. And then tight end position. You have Cole Kmet, one of the better tight ends. And you even have Gerald Everett, who's not even that bad of a backup. So, and you combine that with a good O-line in Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, Darnell White. There's no reason why Caleb Williams can't have a good season, especially for a rookie quarterback. Will he put up Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud numbers like they did in their rookie seasons? Who knows? But there's no reason why he can't have a good season. Defensively, you can argue it's similar. Like, they have a really good defense as well. In my opinion, it starts with their secondary. Jalen Johnson, arguable top. I think he's 100% a top 5 corner. You can argue top 3. You can argue the best corner. You have Tyreek Stevenson and Jaquan Brisker, who are up-and-coming young secondary players. And Kyler Gordon as well. Now, you do have Kevin Byard, who has sort of been regressing as he's gotten older. He's still good, but I think the secondary is where they really stand out. And then I think you go to their linebacker room. TJ Edwards, one of the better linebackers. Tremaine Edmonds is a really good linebacker. And for Jack Sanborn to be your 3rd best linebacker, inside coverage linebacker, whatever you want to call it, is very good. And their D-line is obviously their weak point. It's pretty much just Montez Sweat that really is a threat to offenses. Like, you don't really game plan around anybody else outside of Montez Sweat. But their defense can be top 10. Their offense can be top 15. And for that reason, I do have them finishing with an 8-9 record. If Caleb Williams was in his 3rd year, maybe I predict him to win 13 games with this team, 12 games, 11. But I'm going to go 8-9. Play it safe. He is a rookie quarterback. Even CJ Stroud in his amazing season, I think the Texans won 8 or 9 games. So I don't think this is that bad, this unrealistic of a prediction. And MVP, I actually do have it going to Caleb Williams. Obviously, I try to go with the quarterback, and I think Caleb Williams is going to have a good enough season where he can sort of be the Bears' MVP. Will he be the best player on the Bears? I don't even think that'll be close. I don't think he'll be close to the best player on the Bears. But the MVP award normally goes to quarterback, so I decided to give it to Caleb Williams here. And obviously that means I gave him Rookie of the Year for the Bears. I think he'll obviously be the best rookie for the Bears. And then Offensive Player of the Year, I did decide to give it to DJ Moore. It was him or Keenan Allen. And I think Moore will have the better statistical season. Close to 1,500 yards maybe, 10 touchdowns, close to it. And then Defensive Player of the Year, I think it's obvious that Jalen Johnson is the best player on this defense. So I went and gave him Defensive Player of the Year. And that takes us to the team finishing 2nd in this division, which I do have being the Green Bay Packers, which means I do have the Lions at 1. But speaking of the Packers, it's honestly, there's not much to really talk about. with the Packers in terms of the team being different. It's essentially the same team. Offensively, it's the same plus Josh Jacobs. You pretty much swap out Aaron Jones with Josh Jacobs, and everything else is the same. You still have Jordan Love, Dobbs, Watson, Reed, Wicks, Musgrave. Your O-line is pretty much the same. And not only is the team the same, so they still have like that chemistry together, but it's such a young group that they can all get better. And then with Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, they're very similar in terms of like ability and like where you would rank them amongst running backs. They're both in that low top 10 range, I'd say. Like, I don't think you can say Josh Jacobs or Aaron Jones is that much better than the other. And you combine that with pretty much the same team who played well. They beat the Packers in the playoffs. If everyone develops well because they're a young group, it'll be a very good offense. Arguably a top 10 offense, in my opinion. Defensively, it's honestly pretty much the same defense as well. You have Luke Van Ness, Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary. You still have Quay Walker. You draft Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, who I like that pick. And their secondary, you add Xavier McKinney alongside Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander, who is also one of the better corners in football, one of the best corners in football. This team is pretty much the same. You pretty much swap Aaron Jones out with Josh Jacobs, and you add Xavier McKinney, and I guess Edgerrin Cooper as well. I don't see why they can't somewhat replicate their success from last year, which is why I have them finishing with a 10-7 record. MVP I do have going to Jordan Love, and the reason I have him winning Offensive Player of the Year is because I don't see any of their players standing out amongst the other. I don't see any of their receivers. I think all their receivers are going to have all their three at least, are going to have similar good seasons. Like, I could see not a single player on this team having 1,000 yards, but like 3 or 4 having 800 yards. So that's why I didn't want to give any of them Offensive Player of the Year, because I don't think any of them will necessarily statistically stand out. But I think Jordan Love will have a great year. Defensive Player of the Year, I did give it to Jair Alexander. Clearly the best player on that defense. He'll put up, not necessarily numbers because he's a corner, but he'll just play well. And then Rookie of the Year, I went with Edgerrin Cooper. Now, I was thinking to go maybe their first-round pick, Jordan Morgan, but based on the depth chart, it says he's not going to start. And it did say Edgerrin Cooper was going to play, and I really like him as well, so I think he'll be the best rookie that plays the most on the Packers team. And I do think they will have a very good season, reaching 10 wins, but just not quite as good of a year as my first place team, which is the Detroit Lions. They made the NFC Championship last year. They were so close to winning it. And just like the Packers, their team pretty much stays the same. Because when you look at the offense, it's still Gibbs, Montgomery. You still have Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Laporta. Their O-line is one of the best O-lines in football. And their offense is pretty much the same. And it was really good. There's honestly not much to say in this offense. I think they added Donovan Peoples-Jones. They might have added him in the middle of last year. But it's the same team. It's going to be, or same offense. It's going to be a really good offense. When you look at their defense, it's pretty much the same as well. Outside of the secondary is a little different because it was not a very good secondary. Before we get to that, their front seven, Aiden Hutchinson is poised to potentially break out into that top tier, second tier of edge rushers. Aleem McNeil, I really like Aleem McNeil. I think he could have a big breakout, especially being next to DJ Reader, who they added in the offseason, and Marcus Davenport. McNeil is arguably the third or fourth best player on this front seven, or this D-line. So no one's going to put that much attention to him. That's why I think I had him as my breakout player for the Lions, and I think he'll just get a ton of production. And then linebacker core, you have Alex Anzalone, who's still a good linebacker. You have Jack Campbell, who you drafted out of Iowa last year, who played well. It'll be a good linebacker unit. And then the secondary. This is what really was their weakness last year, but I think it is significantly better. You bring in Carlton Davis from the Bucs, who's a good corner. You still have, obviously, Brian Branch. They took out of Alabama, who's a good safety. You have Kirby Joseph still. And then in the draft, you draft Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, and you also draft Ennis Rakestraw, who I liked as well. It's a much improved secondary and a very good secondary as well. And that leads my Lions record prediction at 11-6. Before you get too upset, I could see them winning 12 or 13 games. It's a very good team. But I just think there's so much competition in the NFC that I think the best team in the NFC will win. I don't see a team winning 13 games in the NFC. Maybe a team like the Niners, Cowboys, or Eagles. But MVP I do have going to Jared Goff. I don't see anyone else. He's a good enough quarterback that he can get that MVP for the Lions. Offensive Player of the Year, Amon-Ra St. Brown just produces. He just puts up great numbers. I don't see why he can't do it again. Same thing with Aiden Hutchinson at Defensive Player of the Year. And Rookie of the Year, I went with Terrion Arnold, the rookie corner they took. And that leaves us to the final standings for the NFC North. Lions win the division at 11-6, followed by the Packers at 10-7, Bears at 8-9, and then the Vikings at 5-12. And that will do it for my NFC North preview. Let me know what you agreed with or disagreed with. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and also turn the notification bell on so you don't miss when a new video is posted. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.